The last 32 years have been horrendous. They still are, and they always will be.
The murder of 11-year-old Leslie Molseed casts a long shadow.
You're numb because you keep coming back to the fact that Lel's never coming home.
It was a horrific crime that destroyed 3 families.
This is the man that had killed my sister. And this is the last face that Lel had seen.
I can't erase the past, I wish I could. It tears me apart some days.
And it played on the mind of one man for more than 30 years.
When he thought the front door was going in his dreams, or he thought there was someone in the garden, he thought they were coming for him.
He lived a very unhappy, deviant and dark life.
The discovery of Leslie Molseed's body here on Rishworth Moor in West Yorkshire was sensational news back in October 1975. And more than 3 decades later, her death was in the headlines again when her murderer was finally brought to justice. But what about the years in between? Well, they were filled with drama and a flawed police investigation that led to one of Britain's most infamous miscarriages of justice. So how did detectives arrest the wrong man, condemning him to prison for a crime he did not commit? And how, so many years later, did police finally identify the real killer? In 1975, the Molseed family were living on the Turf Hill estate in Rochdale. Leslie was the youngest of 4 children. She had a brother, Freddie, and 2 sisters, Julie and Laura.
She was bubbly, so chatty, so full of life, and really was mischievous. One of the most gorgeous little creatures you will ever know.
She was a lovely kid. Beautiful child. Really beautiful.
October the 5th began like any other Sunday at number 11 Delamere Road. The children's stepfather, Danny, was at work, and their mum, April, was making a start on lunch.
Through my mind went, oh, you don't have any bread. So I looked at the wee rota and I thought, who's next? And it was Leslie. So I called her in.
Leslie!
I says, Leslie, down, will you go and get me a loaf? And she says, yes, no problem.
Don't be long! Okay, Mum. I was upstairs folding the clothes and I shouted through the window. I said, where are you going? I said, to the shop and that. I said, okay, I'll see you.
The last I saw of her was at the bottom of the road, turning the corner, and that was the last time I saw my daughter.
Leslie left home at about 12:30. As she headed to the shops, she was spotted by a number of neighbours.
The last sighting of Leslie is probably going into Styopes Lane. Styopes Lane is a high-sided lane that makes its way up to the only shops that would have been open to Leslie for her to go on that day. And I think anybody visiting that scene would say that's a very good point for a possible abduction.
I don't know if it was about half an hour to an hour, and I said to Mum, she's not back. Lel's not back yet, so that's when Mum sent us out to have a look for her.
I was at my boyfriend's and I thought I'll go and visit my mum and that, so I went down to Styopes Lane and I just crossed Turf Hill Road and there was my brother Fred and he was running and I said, oh, where are you off, Fred? He said, oh, Lel went to the shop over an hour ago and she's not come back. So I quickly marched round and my mum was at the gate at that particular time looking out and I said, Mum, what's going on? She looked really drawn, really, really worried.
I was expecting to find her. The fact that I couldn't, you know, the panic set in and I thought, I just never thought I wouldn't find her.
Next thing you know, I bumped into Danny, his stepdad, And we were going down Stipes Lane and he was going absolutely frantic. We're going in and out of gardens, opening up sheds, shouting for her. And then the neighbours got to hear that she'd gone missing and they were coming out.
And you can only imagine the sense of terror that there must have been actually on the estate as the hours unfolded.
She would stop and talk to people and all that, so you could trace Lel's steps by the people that she talked to. But she wasn't talking to anybody.
In the days that followed, as the police search widened, Leslie's family began to fear the worst.
I went into meltdown. I was useless to anybody, even myself. Completely and utterly useless.
I went numb. And although I was only 16 at the time, I knew something bad had happened. And I can always remember it was Tuesday morning and Mum was upstairs. She was actually sat up in Lel's bed and she had a whole pair of the old American black and white baseball boots. And she just put them down on the bedside table and I put the cup of tea there and she said, "She's never going to wear them again, Julie." And I said, "No, Mum, she's not." And we both burst into tears and just started crying, so we knew then that Lel was never coming home.
Those fears were confirmed 3 days later when Leslie's body was found on Rishworth Moor in West Yorkshire, 10 miles from where she had lived.
She'd been stabbed 12 times, and most of those stab wounds were around the shoulder and upper back area. Some of them were very fierce. The knife had been driven up to the hilt, and one indeed did go through Leslie's heart. She was fully clothed. Her body had possibly been posed. Her knickers were on show, and it was quite apparent there was semen staining on Leslie's vest, on her skirt, and on her knickers.
The details of Leslie's brutal murder spread fear and suspicion through the community.
The rumour would have gone round immediately that a stranger had snatched Leslie off the streets, and then so something approaching some form of hysteria really can build up.
I think inevitably there is a great downward pressure on the officers, on the senior officers, and then down to the officers on the street. They want to get a result. They want to get this person off the street.
As the days and weeks and months went on that Leslie's killer hadn't been caught, then everybody locally became a suspect.
This is not a thing that can be solved quickly unless there is some sudden breakthrough as a result of information from the public.
But with no specific breakthrough, the police turned their attention to anyone in the community who aroused suspicion generally. Their inquiries led them to a 23-year-old Inland Revenue clerk called Stefan Kishko.
Stefan was the son of Ukrainian migrants, and he was rather a simple soul as a child. He looked odd, he was quite large for his age, he was quite timid, and rather a mummy's boy, really. When he was 18, he was walking home with his father, Ivan, and Ivan collapsed and died in the street. Now, Ivan was about the only male influence on his life, really, and when his father died, Stefan became even closer to his mum and really did cling to her apron strings.
As a social misfit, Kishko was an easy target for local suspicions, and he'd been accused, wrongly, of indecent exposure by 3 young girls. On December the 21st, 1975, police took him in for questioning about the Moleseed murder. Over the next 3 days, he was to become their prime suspect. When 23-year-old Stefan Kishko was taken in for questioning, police believed they'd found the killer of Leslie Moleseed.
He was extremely naive and ingenuous and very trusting, and he would have been very vulnerable at the time of his arrest.
Before the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984, a solicitor did not have to be present when police interviewed a suspect, and Kishko was questioned without one over the next 3 days.
It was just before Christmas when he was arrested. I think the officers must have thought that Christmas had come a couple of days early. Stefan arrived gift wrapped for them.
None of us were in that room. We don't know what went on, and he did emerge as a good circumstantial local suspect. There was no doubt about that.
While questioning Kishko, the police made several discoveries which convinced them they had the right man.
The detectives established that he had an apparent interest in pornography, also that he had a medical condition for which he'd been receiving testosterone treatment.
He suffered from something called hypogonadism, which is that the male testes haven't descended, so he's sexually immature, sexually inactive. So the GP prescribed him testosterone jabs. So he took the jabs in the arm, and it made him sexually active at 23, the first time ever.
Kishko told police the injections had triggered new sexual feelings, leading him to buy pornography. But they claimed they'd triggered something much more powerful, uncontrollable sexual urges that had turned him into a child killer.
Tell us where you were.
Then came the moment that sealed Kishko's fate. Under the pressure of intense questioning, he suddenly confessed to murdering Leslie Molseed.
He seemed to be under the impression that if he admitted it, gave them what they wanted, he would be allowed home, and then it would all get sorted out, knowing that he, of course, was innocent. Whatever was going through his mind, it was a dreadful, dreadful mistake.
Finally allowed access to a solicitor, Kishko retracted his confession, but by then the police had made up their minds, and on Christmas Eve, they charged him with murder. With Kishko remanded in custody, police were convinced they had the right man behind bars. So they made no connection when another crime happened a few months later, less than a mile from where Leslie had been abducted, even though it bore chilling similarities. On July the 3rd, 1976, part-time taxi driver Ronald Castry was charged with a sexual assault on a young girl, then released on bail. That night, the 22-year-old went home to his wife and told her what he'd done.
It was the early hours of the morning. It was past his shift and everything, and he came in and he said, "Right, you can divorce me now." And I said, "Why would I want to do that?" And he said, "I'm in trouble, Bev. I've interfered with the child. The police have had me in."
It happened in a street in Rochdale's Turf Hill estate, the same area where Leslie Molseed had been abducted before her murder. Two 9-year-old girls were playing together in the street. Despite confusing statements by the pair, police were later able to establish that a man had approached them both in his car. That man was Ronald Castry. One of the girls fled in fear, but Castry managed to get her friend into his car and drove away.
It would appear that the girl was taken to a derelict house, had some of her clothing removed, and that Castry ejaculated and probably had the little girl touch him. So it was a very serious sexual offence.
The girl managed to escape and ran home to tell her mother, who immediately called the police. Castry was arrested and pleaded guilty a week later. But despite the seriousness of the offence, the punishment was shockingly lenient.
It's incredible to think that in July 1976, for an offence of indecent assault and gross indecency on a 9-year-old girl, the penalty at Rochdale Magistrates Court was £25 fine.
Such a light sentence made it easy for Castry's crime to be brushed under the carpet. His protective parents insisted to his confused wife it was an aberration, the result of a breakdown, and completely out of character.
I was shocked, stunned, not quite sure what kind of a person he was, but then again I was only young myself. And to take all that in and have his parents fuss around going, "He'll be all right, Ronnie will be all right," you know, he's seeking treatment and everything, he's just working too hard. And then of course life carried on.
Beverly had met Castry in 1971 when she was just 16 and he was 18. They started dating and within 3 months they were engaged. But even then, it was a far from perfect relationship.
I knew he was seeing other girls even when we were engaged, even before we got married. But they'll deny it, won't they? Till the dying day, till the last breath, they'll deny it. "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Bev. Come back when you do," you know. And then at that age, 16, 17, 18, you think, "Oh, well, he won't do it again," you know. So Stupid here, went and married him at 18, thinking I knew it all. How wrong was I? The violence